On this week's episode of Pimp My Train, we're taking this relatively stock Bachmann Davenport gas side rod that's got a little bit of weathering and a dude chilling inside, and we're going to make this thing a lot tighter using this sweet swag pack of tight stuff that I printed up on the super tight PeoPoly Moai. So let's dive into the project. So like I said in the intro, I got myself a PeoPoly Moai 3D printer, and this thing is absolutely amazing, and decided, you know what, being that I do a lot of model train printing stuff, if you guys remember from the $800 plus 3D printing video, things like that, I've used 3D printing a lot to pimp out my model trains and make them extra tight, so I figured why not do it on this locomotive right here, especially considering the only company that made a dedicated upgrade kit for it sadly pretty much is like no longer in business. I decided, you know what, it's a good opportunity to step in there and offer something that kind of fills in the gap per se. Now mind you, the designs that I've come up with are my own versions and it's not as entailed as that one. The idea is it's a launching pad with little accessories that you can use to make your locomotive that much cooler. So first things first, let's go through the swag pack and talk about the different stuff that's in there, then get it on the locomotive. So first things first, we have a toolbox, and all the items in here have been pre-painted by me before the show, just for the sake of time. This one I used the common method that I've showed in the other Pimp My Train video where I took the spray filler, sprayed it on the part, made it look like wood. Only difference here is to give it a little bit of texture. I just hit it with some really coarse sandpaper, lightly, just to scratch the surface a little bit. Hit it with the primer, hit it with some straight brown India ink, and got a really nice part. Next up we have a small little exhaust unit. And what I've done is I've also angled the base so it lines up better with the hood on locomotive. I do recommend taking a piece of like 1000 grit sandpaper, putting it on there, and just lightly shaving the bottom down so it more closely matches the hood curve, but you know, do as you please. Then there is a small little air cleaner right here. I'm going to explain where that goes. And two weights that go on the rear of the locomotive. Here's one of them. So with that said, let's dive in. So I figure first things first, let's work on the hood as that has the most stuff, and then we'll install the weights on the back and go from there. Now it should be noted that you are going to be hacking up the hood of this locomotive a little bit to install things, so if you're not comfortable doing that, avoid the air cleaner part. Everybody's, you know, got their own level of what they're comfortable doing. For me, I really don't care, so let's dive in. Use a pair of flush cutters here to just come along and quite literally snap off the crappy exhaust and have it fly off the set. That was not planned. So obviously we've lost the exhaust, but now we kind of need to make an opening for our air cleaner. But I also have a little 1/8 inch drill bit here, so I'm just going to manually drill the hole out. And perfect, we now have a mounting hole for our air cleaner. So if you're finding your air cleaner is a little bit of a tight fit, what you can do is you can just rub a little bit of sandpaper on the bottom, or just rub a little bit of sandpaper in the hole, whichever one works to get it to fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and actually dry fit the part first. That'd be smart. Double check. And yeah, it goes in there. It's a little bit tight though, so I think I'm just going to enlarge the hole a little more. And perfect, that's in there. Believe it or not, on mine it's such a tight fit that I don't see the need to glue it down, therefore I'm not. So we've got our air cleaner installed. It's already looking good, but obviously we need somewhere for the exhaust to go. So I'm going to work on gluing on the little muffler unit, and then we can go from there. go. We now have the little muffler air cleaner unit installed. It's a little bit tricky to do, so I definitely recommend using 5-minute epoxy and some kicker. And if there's a little bit of glue around the outside, don't worry, a little bit of clever weathering, nobody will ever know. So next up, we can work on installing our little pre-weathered toolbox here. Thinking I'll put it on the opposite side of the exhaust because I don't think anybody wants to get exhaust in their face. So same as before, just a little bit of glue, just rub that on there. These micro brushes are also really nice. Try and find the cheapest ones that you can though, because they can get a little bit pricey. Set that guy up like that. Okay, so now that we got the toolbox installed, we got the air cleaner, and we got the muffler, we can now work on installing our weights on the back. Same story as with the other stuff. This is pretty simple. I'm just going to put on a dab of glue on both. I think my super glue is going bad, sadly. Need to buy some more. And then I'm just going to find a spot that I think looks pretty good. That looks good. It's a little bit inset from the edges, and I'll show you in a minute. Perfect. There we go. So I'm going to give the kicker here a minute or two to evaporate. Then I'm going to come along and do a quick weathering job to tie everything together. This thing will be looking super tight in no time. Okay, so I've let the kicker sit for a little bit, let it evaporate. So now it's time to come along and weather everything. So what I've decided I'm going to do for the top where the muffler is I'm just going to use a little bit of the Micro Mark Rust and Dust. I need to grab the rust. Oops. But I also have some dry weathering powder as well. And if need be, a little bit of straight India ink. So what I'm thinking I'm going to start doing with is just going over everything with this and then using some weathering powders on the weights on the back to make them look a little more rusty. And I think we'll be good, so let's get started. All right, well, in a few short minutes, we've been able to take this locomotive and make it into something totally different, but also something totally tight as well. Now, one admission I do have to make is I think my CA glue is going pretty bad because I had a little bit of a hard time getting the muffler to stick on the top, but I think it'll be fine. If I need to, I can always go back with a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, but it should be okay as long as nobody smacks into the exhaust. So I hope you guys found this interesting, and it's a good little foray into how you can use a 3D printer, especially a resin one, to create awesome little detail parts to swag out your motive power. I mean, quite honestly, this is a total of 5 pieces, and I've got plans to make more detail stuff, maybe add a light up here, maybe add some doors, maybe add some skirts to the side. We'll see about that, but it's a good example of how a little bit of work and a little bit of creativity can really make your equipment into something totally different. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and as for me, I got a little more 3D design work to do because let's face it, I love pimping out my locos.